Hello and welcome everyone. Happy Women's History Month. I can't believe it's almost over. My name is Jenner Deal and I am the chair of the Women's Advisory Board for the City of West Hollywood. On behalf of the entire board, we're super excited to come together today in celebration of the late Honorable Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one of the fiercest trailblazers for women in the United States. She was known as the notorious RBG, and she fundamentally changed the course of life for American women as we know it. Her service as a Supreme Court justice and dedication to equality for all created a legal landscape for women's rights to stand on. We have an incredible group of panelists with us today to help us in this celebration, and moderating today's discussion is my vice chair, Angela De Silva. But before we begin, we'd like to share a quick video to kick off the event.
Ruth was born in Brooklyn in 1933. No one could have thought that she'd grow up to be that fiery, clever justice, donning the jabot, fighting for equality, dissenting, saying no. It takes a lot of courage to stand and disagree. Come and meet my idol, my favorite supreme. I wanna be just like RBG, fighting for our rights and shining truth. I wanna be just like RBG, glorious, notorious Ruth. Ruffling some feathers while studying the law. Harvard took just 9 smart women, 500 men in all. Ginsburg was on fire, twice made the law review. Graduated #1 whilst a mother too. An advocate for women, so to bring equality, choosing words strategically and fluent legalese. I wanna be just like RBG, fighting for our rights and shining truth. I wanna be just like RBG, the glorious, notorious Ruth. She never stopped, she never quit. Now on the highest court she sits to pave the way for other women like you and me.
In my lifetime, I expect to see 3, 4, perhaps even more women on the high court bench. Women not shaped from the same mold, but of different complexions. I surely would not be in this room today without the determined efforts of men and women who kept dreams of equal citizenship alive.
I wanna be just like RBG, fighting for our rights and shining truth. I wanna be just like RBG, glorious, notorious Ruth. Glorious, notorious Ruth.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Oh my gosh, that was so cute, and it will be stuck in my head forever, hopefully. Anyways, I also want to thank our council because RBG's birthday is March 15th, and thanks to them, every year West Hollywood will be commemorating that as RBG Day. So with that said, I would like to introduce next our Mayor, Lindsay Horvath.
Thank you so much, Angela and Jenner and all the members of the WAB who made today's event possible, along with our staff. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with all of you and to participate in today's event. That video came to my attention through Rabbi Heather Miller. Thank you for sharing. And it's actually on a Grammy award-winning album by Joni. So if you want to check that out, another woman making history about a woman making history. Who knew? It's so meta, but I just Want to say thank you to everyone who's participating today and making this panel possible, our guests. I can't wait to hear from you. So I'm not going to say too much other than I think I have every article of clothing and every kind of accessory possible with Ruth's face on it, which seems sort of like sacrilege for how amazing and extraordinary a woman she is. It's like weird to have her on a sock, but I think that it just kind of goes to show the fandom that she certainly earned in the work that she's done to fight for all of us and for generations to come of women. And, you know, her memory lives on in our community and we will keep it alive. And now I will turn it over to Mayor Pro Tem Meister.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And thank you everyone for being here today. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is my shiro, a Jewish gal from Brooklyn, just like me. That's where the similarities unfortunately stop. Justice Ginsburg was a brilliant attorney, activist, and jurist. She fought for civil rights and equal rights for everyone, justice for all. She represented all the values we hold dear, especially here in West Hollywood. And luckily for us, she was ahead of her time. I want to thank the Women's Advisory Board and staff for putting this event together, and thank you to all our panelists. I look forward to this evening. Thank you. And now I'm going to hand this over to Councilmember John D'Amico.
Hi, everyone. I was so inspired by that video, I had to make a lace collar for myself. So there we are. I just want to listen. I really appreciate that everyone gets this, got together for this and that we get to support this and sort of once again show who we are and what it means to be a West Hollywood resident. Thank you all so much. And Brad, nice to see you. And I will turn it over to Seppi Shine.
Thank you, Council Member. I want to thank the Women's Advisory Board and staff for putting this incredible event together. Thank you for our incredible panelists. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is also my shiro as well. One of the things that as an attorney we don't see often is someone who has affected so many people's lives that she really has brought so much attention to the Supreme Court and what being a justice means. And really, truly, in the video, what was so beautiful is the young girls being inspired to follow her path. And that brings me so much joy. Without Ruth Bader Ginsburg's great work on the Supreme Court, I would not be able to have so many rights that I have as a woman, and I would not be able to marry the love of my life, Ashley. So I'm forever in gratitude for her and what she's done. And now I would like to turn it over to Councilmember John Erickson.
Thank you so much. And I'm so excited that we have such an amazing lineup of speakers. Thanks to our WAB and to everyone joining in. I have the great privilege of serving as the board chair for the ACLU here of Southern California. Carrie Ann, I know you know that organization very well, but that's exactly where Ruth Bader Ginsburg, before becoming the notorious RBG, got set up with the Women's Rights Project. I mean, where do you have an individual whose life and work has impacted those people in cities that she's never been, places like West Hollywood, all over the country? We have LGBT people, women, everywhere else, that her rulings and everything she's done has made it so that we have equal rights and representation. What an icon. I have those socks too, Lindsay. I think you gave me those socks a long time ago, but that's exactly who we are as West Hollywood. And I'm envious of my council member colleague, John, for getting the crochet done really quickly. I'm gonna have to learn how we did that, but thank you to all and so excited to see this amazing panel.
All right, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panel. First, we have Carrie Ann Farrell Hines, Esquire. She is the president of the Los Angeles County Commission for Women. And we also have Mary Lou Guevara, executive director of the League of Women Voters, Los Angeles. And lastly, we have Brad Sears, JD, interim executive director, and David Sanders, distinguished scholar of law and policy at the Williams Institute. So first, I'd just like everyone to introduce themselves, share a little bit about yourself, your organization, the work you do, what inspires you, your passions, tell me your life story. Fast. No, just kidding. We will start with Carrie Ann.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I was really excited to be able to participate in this today. As you all mentioned, I am the president of the LA County Commission for Women. We were founded in the 70s as part of this, movement of women to demand that they be treated equally under the law. Right after the failed passage of the Equal Rights Amendment in 1971. It spawned many movements to move women's rights through the courts and through the political systems. And one of my other roles is as the president of the National Women's Political Caucus of California, which is the largest state chapter of a national grassroots organization that was founded by women like Shirley Chisholm and Betty Friedan and Bella Abzug and Gloria Steinem, and their focus was on getting women, recruiting women, supporting women to seek positions of power, political power, to change laws. So running for office, getting appointments, leading political parties, and things like that. And one important and really interesting little connection between NWPC and Ruth Bader Ginsburg is that NWPC lobbied, advocated on behalf of Justice Ginsburg, then Attorney Ginsburg, to be appointed by President Jimmy Carter to the federal bench. So, we have a long history. I have a number of threads to, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg through my NWPC work. And then, as John mentioned, through my work on the ACLU board. And I just look forward to talking a bit more about it when we get into our program.
Thank you so much. That's, oh my gosh, so inspiring. Mary Lou, I'll go to you next.
Well, thank you everybody who's joining us online, and thank you to the City of West Hollywood, the council members, the mayor, for your time today. And thank you for making this such a special day to celebrate the life of Justice Ginsburg. As you all know, my name is Mary Lou Guevara. I'm here on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Los Angeles. The League is probably one of the oldest, if not the oldest, nonpartisan voter education organization in the country. I represent the Los Angeles chapter. The League has over 100-year history. It came about during the women's suffrage movement. Some would say well beyond before that. Last year we celebrated 100 years, along with 100 years of women getting the right to vote, winning the right to vote. It was a long fight. And today, unfortunately, the League still has the same challenges, trying to get access and equal voting rights for both not only women and men, but also through a lot of communities, especially here in Los Angeles, in terms of voter resources, voter information, voter access. So a lot of our programs are about making sure that the next generation of voters is educated in terms of what's on their ballot, but also knows a lot of the important work that is being done in their communities, and introduce equity and access into that work. And obviously, honoring the legacy of Justice Ginsburg is one of the things that we want to profile and make sure that we keep alive in order to keep working on a lot of the challenges that we still face today.
Thank you. That is such important work. Everyone's work is. I'll pass it to you now, Brad.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here and great to be with this great panel. And I just want to say thank you to the council members and the mayor. And I'm excited and honored that I got to join this discussion because I too am a big fan of Justice Ginsburg. I had the opportunity to meet her a couple of times, and she was obviously an inspiration. And as a matter of fact, Carrie Ann, like the very first thing I did as a lawyer was research Justice Ginsburg's circuit decisions on LGBT rights. This is going to date me in 1993 when she was being nominated to the Supreme Court for the ACLU to put together a briefing book about the ACLU's position on the nomination. So that was literally one of the first things I did as an actual lawyer. I'm Associate Dean of Public Interest Law at UCLA. And so in that hat, really my job is to help support our fantastic students in pursuing all sorts of careers, serving the public good as lawyers and advocates. I'm also the founding executive director of the Williams Institute, and our charge is to do cutting edge and rigorous research to inform law and policy. And as one notable example related to Justice Ginsburg, in kind of the last three major Supreme Court decisions on LGBT rights, the court directly relied on the research of the Williams Institute. I'm going to give you another example a little bit later in the discussion about a huge report we put out today. I think it's fitting it came out today on LBQ women and the specific challenges that they face because of their intersecting identities that differ from both straight women and gay and bisexual men. And also, I think a great testament to the engagement, activism, and resilience of LBQ women. But I'll talk about that a little bit later. Thanks.
Thanks, Brad. I can't wait to hear about it. But I also, being a fangirl, I must hear a little bit about what it was like meeting her. I'm sorry, I'm deviating, but I really need to know.
Yeah, she actually visited, I think in the mid-2000s, she visited the law school. And there was several different opportunities to interact with her. Actually, because I was with the Williams Institute, and more importantly, I was close to the big donors of the Williams Institute who were part of a smaller discussion with her, got to actually talk with her about marriage equality. This is kind of years, almost a decade before the court reached the decision. And what really struck me about that conversation and her work is she was very aware of courts internationally, and courts like the South Africa Supreme Court that was already moving ahead on LGBT rights and things like marriage equality, and other constitutional law courts. And I think that's just one of the many of the hallmarks of her jurisprudence that really differentiated her from others. She really wanted to learn what the rest of the world was doing and thought that was relevant to what we should be doing here.
Thank you for sharing. So I'm going to jump into my first question. Today, we are celebrating the impact and legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. From your perspective as a leader in your field, what resonates the most about her impact and/or legacy? And Carrie Ann, I'll start with you again.
Well, one of the things that is most notable about Justice Ginsburg's legacy to me is the fact that she was very intentional about bringing women into the legal field and into lifting up the work of women within the legal field. She was noted for having clerks on her staff, for hiring clerks that were, women from all different, types of backgrounds, because she, was a working, mother. She was very intentional, I think, about making sure that working mothers were able to continue with their legal careers and to not be placed in situations where they were forced to have to choose between continuing with their professional careers and their families. And to hear, her former clerks talk about what kind of a judge, of a boss she was, and what kind of a employer she was, and how she, set a standard and set up environments within which, women who, held multiple roles outside of their careers could, manage both. It's demanding, it was hard, and they were expected, to perform at the highest levels. But they were also encouraged to, to not sacrifice their other commitments as well. So I think that that's something that is important about her legacy that's not necessarily talked about quite as frequently. One other, thing that I wanted to mention, there's a documentary that's, coming out that was just recently premiered about Pauli Murray. and the important influence that she had on Justice Ginsburg in her early legal career, and and gave credit to Pauli for sort of laying the foundation for the arguments for equality, the grounds for equality that Justice Ginsburg would use, both in her work with the Women's Rights Project with the ACLU, and then as a judge, and then as a justice, the grounds for all of her positions on equality. So those are two that could really stand out that I wanted to make note of tonight.
Thank you so much. Mary Lou, I'll go to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in full agreement. I think, generally speaking, the legacy of just breaking societal norms, right, which I think is what Carrie Ann spoke about, and using that in her legal career, I think the legacy to follow up, using her skill and her time to create change, right? Whatever your profession is, I mean, legal careers, education for myself and a lot of organizers, it's our nonprofit leadership and trying to use it to create an impact and to create some inclusion and some equity. And really, I think who know that she would become a cultural icon, right? So many years later for having done so. One thing that I think resonates with the work that I do, and I think resonates a lot with where we are in our political, the era of our politics at the moment, is she definitely was very intentional about being able to work across the political spectrum. I mean, I think we've heard a lot about her friendships or her rapport with Justice Scalia, and being able to work obviously with a very polarized, in a very polarized body of justice, and being able to be a great example for civil discourse, providing, a platform for engagement around that, not necessarily changing her point of view on certain things and not looking to change anybody else's point of view, but being able to create a level of understanding and conversation that I think is a great legacy to all of us, right? To continue hedging forward to creating change, but having an understanding of towards those that might not, have the same point of view as us, and using that and, with intent to do a lot of the casework that she did, to be strategic about the change that she was creating in the process.
Awesome, thank you. I'll go to you now, Brad.
Yeah, I would echo all of that and totally agree. There's two things that when I think about her work related to LGBTQ rights, there's really one thing that stands out is she didn't write any of those opinions, and that kind of strategic restraint, not putting her ego. I mean, I can't imagine her sitting on the court with boss talk. This is about sex discrimination. She's such a champion for LGBTQ rights. And she knows for decision after decision with Justice Kennedy, let the man write it. It's not going to be clear. It's going to be a little weird, but we're going to get the votes we needed. Justice Gorsuch is going to do his textualist approach. That's what we need. We're going to get the votes. I mean, that was such her issue. And what a case to be the kind of culmination of her legacy. And I think about the restraint that it took to not do a concurrence, to just let it be. And I think that's pretty incredible. Because I think we all know she was the kind of emanating force, probably behind all those decisions, but particularly in the Bostock Title VII decision this summer. And then when she does write, that she has the ability to cut through kind of this doctrinal nonsense and really makes the law match people's lives. And this was, and so I'll refer to another case. This is in 1998, dealing with people living with HIV. And at that time, I am a person living with HIV. I was an HIV legal service as attorney, we were worried, would the Americans Disability Act be held to apply to people living with HIV? Would HIV, even if you didn't have symptoms, still be considered a disability? Majority opinion is this kind of very narrow thing about if you're HIV positive, it limits your ability, your reproductive ability, which is like, okay, most of the people impacted at that time and today are gay men. There are people who don't want to have kids. There are people who are too young to have kids, too old to have kids. Like, this is a weird thread to hang this decision. So Justice Kennedy does write the decision, and she does write a concurrence. And I'm just going to read, and it's just one paragraph. I'm going to read in one sentence in it. And so the question is, what is it about someone's life, even if you have no symptoms, that HIV impacts? And I know as a 27-year-old with HIV at the time, this just really spoke to me. The disease limits life itself. Like, that's what it limits, life itself. The disease inevitably pervades life's choices, education, employment, family, and financial undertakings, the ability to even plan for the future. It affects the need for, and as this case shows, the ability to obtain healthcare because of the reaction of others to the impairment. It's basically all she writes. There's a couple more sentences, but it just, for me, just cuts right to the heart of, yeah, it impacts everything about someone's life. Just kind of very simply, briefly, beautifully written, but really captures, I think, the experience of having HIV then and probably still to this day.
Thank you, Brad, and thank you for sharing that that reading. Our next question, I'll start with Mary Lou. I feel like we're kind of, anyways. Prior to her service on the U.S. Supreme Court in 1971 and 72, Ruth Bader Ginsburg won cases in which the court held for the first time that discrimination on the basis of sex constitutes a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution. Where are we today regarding the status of gender equity and protections for sexual orientation and gender identity, and how far have we come?
I mean, I think we do need to recognize that. I mean, there's been some definite good things, right? We've definitely seen a cultural shift, a societal shift, but I think like everything, I think usually it takes a couple of years for our laws to catch up, and sometimes, to public opinion. It's unfortunate that, since that was written, we're still trying to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, the ERA, right? 38 states have been reached, but whether those protections will be applied to our Constitution is still a question. And the fact that it's still a question is more than unfortunate. And I think a couple of weeks ago, we had our Congress vote on the Violence Against Women Act, and the fact that you still have some elected officials that represent both women and, other communities, men that are impacted, and their children that are impacted by these pieces of legislation and protections, and they can still vote against it, I think there are no words for that. I think, so while, we've had in the last couple of years, we had the Women's March on Washington. We've had a couple of those marches, symbolic, I think, great for, community leadership, for the building of it. We've seen a lot of great organizations and nonprofit here in Los Angeles be born out of that movement. We've seen shifts in a lot of different industries through the Me Too movement. We've seen, great corporations now having to, whether you want to say it's symbolic or not, having to have female leadership, right? As part of their boards, as part of their staff, as part of their, face. And the fact that, when we have, things on TV and we don't see women represented, it is definitely a point of discussion. I think it has also been great things. I mean, the League is a testament to it. The fact that the League is now working on trans voter empowerment programs, right? And that we're able to see feminism as intersectional feminism, right? And we're able to recognize, how it affects everybody and how everybody has a different story. And we can all contribute to it. So a lot of great things have happened, but I think there's still a lot of work to do. Legally speaking, I think we still have some social norms, in the legacy of Justice Ginsburg that need to be broken. And I'm sure my panelists have a lot more things to add to that, so I don't want to take up, but, I think we need to celebrate, all the work that we've done, but use it for inspiration for the great work that's still to be done.
Yeah, it is surprising how far we've come and how far we still have to go. But I'm so thankful we have people like you who are doing the work and helping us out. So I'm going to jump with that same question to Brad and then Carrie Ann.
Yeah, and I think the pace at which the Biden-Harris administration is moving on LGBTQ issues is breathtaking and refreshing, and we're just going to see a lot of things. We have seen a lot of things happen very quickly. We're going to continue to see that, and the legacy of the discrimination, of the violence, of the economic exclusion is going to have a very long tail. And I think what Justice Ginsburg got about so much of our world, but including LGBTQ rights, it's about gender, it's about gender, it's about gender. And so I'm going to now go back to that report I was talking to that we put out today. And I think the starting place is important to understand that lesbian, bisexual, trans, queer women make up over 55% of the LGBTQ population. They're the largest group. If you go to younger age groups, like young women and girls, it's 2/3. So this is the largest group in the LGBTQ population. 72% of those women identify as bisexual, and 40% are people of color. And when you look at their experiences, they experience life as who they are, and the types of discrimination and marginalization that they face on their full identity. And so one of the most shocking statistics in the report is that 46% report physical or sexual violence. It's much higher in straight women or gay or bisexual men. Almost half are living at 200% of the federal poverty level or below. Almost half report experiences of discrimination, almost or of depression. I'm sorry, almost 3/4 report experiences of discrimination in the past year. And you go down indicator after indicator after indicator, LBQ women are in a different place than straight women and gay bisexual men, and definitely in a very different place in the straight men. But when you look at political engagement and activity, you also see levels, and this is true of gay men and bisexual men as well, of 95, 97, 98%. People are voting, people are out there giving money, they're involved in campaigns across a number of indicators, they're very engaged. What differs LBQ women from gay and bisexual men is that they're politically engaged across all of the issues that are impacting their lives, and not just on LGBT issues. They're 8 times more likely to be more broadly engaged than just LGBT issues than gay and bisexual men. And I think our path forward is, yes, let's pass the Equality Act. But what's going to lift the most LGBTQ people out of poverty? It's not the Equality Act. It's the federal minimum wage, and it's reducing the gender wage gap. Those are going to have a much bigger impact in lifting people in our communities out of poverty. It's programs that help low-income and poor families with children. That's going to have a much bigger impact on LGBT communities, or people in communities who are low-income and poor. So we experience life intersectionally, and our solutions also have to be intersectional.
Thank you, Brad. That is very interesting. Thank you for sharing. Carrie Ann.
So I think what Brad is saying is, what Justice Ginsburg's own words said, which are, we have to have more women in these spaces where decisions are being made. And the women have to come from a diversity of backgrounds to ensure that the appropriate breadth of decisions are being made. You know, I have words to describe sort of how I feel about where we are right now. I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm disappointed, and I'm also motivated. You know, I think that we have a tendency as a country to, you know, society broadly, to see accomplishments and then to feel as though we've solved that problem. You know, we're post-racial, post-gender, post, you know, whatever, you know, identity that we want to put in there. And then, you know, argue about whether or not we need to do more. Yes, we do need to do more because, you know, as we're watching, you know, the fight, as Mary Lou, you know, mentioned, we're watching the fight to get the Violence Against Women Act, you know, reauthorized, you know, that we still had, that was a struggle and it was turned into a partisan political debate as opposed to it being, you know, a piece of legislation that has proven that it is reducing the incidence of violence against women and girls and ensuring that spaces are created where they can thrive and succeed. You know, that in the wake of, you know, the Atlanta shootings that were targeting, you know, Asian women, you know, who were in, you know, working in fields where they were, you know, they were struggling to provide livings for their families, you know, that we would be debating over the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization is, you know, is maddening, you know, and that's with a multiracial woman as the vice president, you know, so clearly there needs to be more work done so that more places where decisions are made have more women that represent more backgrounds. And as Justice Ginsburg said, you know, maybe we need to go to a place where these spaces are predominantly women or sometimes only women, you know, as we see with our Board of Supervisors here in LA County, so that we can have some righting of the ship when it comes to making sure that we really are passing the legislation and policies that are going to really get at, you know, true and full equality.
Thank you so much, Carrie Ann. And I'm going to have some further questions about that later. So I'll come back to you for that. Mary Lou, because I know you have to jump off at 5:45, I'm going to go to you again next, but I'm going to kind of ask questions 4 and 5. So our next question is, Justice Ginsburg was a champion of equality for all, and now, for all. And now the Supreme Court is a majority conservative body with members who have openly expressed discriminatory views regarding the rights of women and LGBTQ people in particular. In the wake of restricting voting rights laws now sweeping across the country, how does this landscape challenge the work that you do, and what is the path forward?
Well, one, I think at the judicial level, we need to, instead of breaking down the protections of the Voting Rights Act, we need to build it up again, right? But it goes beyond that. I mean, I think that's at the least that we can do. We've seen things in Georgia and Florida, the closing of precincts, the restricting voter ID, of access by voter ID law, the limiting early voting access. That's happening. I mean, we've seen it in the news happening in Georgia, but it's happening in a lot of states. So we need to, one, bring attention to it, and then ensure, one, that elected officials are not on election boards, that they're not the ones drawing their own districts. You know, we've come a long way. California is a great example of that. It's not perfect, but there's work to be done here in California with redistricting in terms of transparency, but it needs to have a ripple effect across other states. It starts there. making sure that the process is done fair in drawing of districts, and that information that goes out is equitable, that reaches the neighborhoods that need it the most in terms of factual information. And that we increase the early voting options for those at work, for those that can't travel to precincts that are over 30 minutes away, an hour away. Trying to bridge and take away a lot of the challenges that preclude people from voting. I think beyond that, looking at communities that either have historically not been reached out by political parties to vote. We also need to create systemic change around procedures. I mean, I talked about, for example, the work that the League is doing around trans empowerment with voting, changing the way we train poll workers, on how to greet people that are coming in to vote. The documentation that's necessary to vote. We need to update a lot of those practices and adapt them to where we are and wanting to let people know that we want them to vote. So taking away a lot of the barriers is essentially where we're at. In terms of pivoting of where we need to harness and do an investment, I think we need to invest in local leadership. And that's that's making sure that we get people involved at the neighborhood council level, at the city council level, those council members that are here today. That's a great investment of your time and your skill. We need to get more communities involved. We need to create safe spaces for civic engagement to bridge a lot of those differences. We need to invest in a lot of nonprofits through our volunteer time, and if you have the funds, obviously, donations. And we need to, as we've seen a lot since 2016, we need to run for office ourselves, right? We talk about wanting women to be, at these positions of elected office, but we need to encourage them to run, or we need to decide that we should be the ones running. So I think that it's all encompassing. There's no one way. As Brad said, in terms of solutions, we need to tackle all these different issues, and we need to make sure that people are informed about them and vote on them.
Thank you. Those are so many wonderful things that we need to do. And what I found is that we have these big picture things that we need to do that sometimes it gets daunting, like, okay, but what do we do next? And what's so interesting for me is that Ruth Bader Ginsburg did so much, but it really started with that first court case. So Mary Lou, before you go, I was wondering if you can suggest to our audience, and if the audience has any questions, please put them in the Q&A. What would you suggest as a tangible thing, whether it's a direct link to go to or direct volunteer like a tangible thing that someone could even do within the next week or month to get the ball rolling in their journey of being an advocate and an activist?
Well, I wouldn't represent the League if I didn't tell you to join the League or the League of Women Voters. And if you're joining us outside of Los Angeles, there's leagues all across the country. But if, I would say get involved. Find your passion, right? If it's climate, if it's transportation, if it's about lifting communities from poverty, if it's about, health and safety, I think everybody has something that they care about, even if they don't know it, right? If you keep going over that same pothole on the street and it's making you mad, then call, the city, call your council member, 311 app, and figure out how to get that pothole fixed, right? So I think find either a nonprofit or a volunteer organization and get involved. I would say try to fix something tangible. Start with something little, maybe like that pothole, maybe that couch that doesn't get picked up, right? Create some change for yourself in the community by, if you have the time, doing some volunteer work. I think, cultivating some leadership is a great example. We ask of others time. It's great to be able to invest your own.
Thank you so much. That is such great advice. And thank you so much for being here today. We are so honored to have you. Have a good
Great to be in
evening.
such great company, and I'm sorry that I have to go, but democracy can't wait. So I have another event that I need to go to. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So now we'll go back. I'll go to Carrie Ann. Just to back to that question of, in the wake of restricting voting rights laws now sweeping across the country, how does this landscape challenge the work that you do, and what is the path forward?
I think Mary Lou touched on something that's really important, and that is the value and importance of civic engagement. And I'll talk about it in one of two ways. I think there is a tendency right now for this sense of individualism that everything that happens is because of us, by ourselves, or something that we did or we didn't do, we did right or we didn't do correctly. And the reality is that what makes this country strongest, what makes our community strongest, is when we're in community with each other, and when we're taking responsibility for ensuring that our community is living up to its values, and that the laws are being applied equally, that laws are being passed, laws and policies are being passed that address real problems. And that's only going to happen if we are directly engaged. And so I echo Mary Lou's call to action to be engaged. I'm not going to presume that everyone is voting, that everyone is educating themselves and informing themselves. So I'm going to say, make sure that you are being an engaged and informed citizen. And the second thing I want to just bring up is that, the Secretary of State of California recently appointed, Governor Newsom recently appointed Shirley Weber as the new Secretary of State, because Alex Padilla was appointed as the as California's junior senator, and I think it's really important that he appointed her because she has an experience and a background with the importance of civic engagement as a Black woman from the South, who can really speak to what it means to really hold your vote value, hold your vote in value, and the importance and significance of educate. And her background is also as an educator, so she's focused on making sure that there is civic education and civic engagement that's going down into the K through 12 and into children, and sort of expanding civic education as a way to expand civic engagement. And I think that's going to be relevant and important for us to really see change, is making sure that we sort of get at the cynicism that people have about voting, the cynicism that people have about government, that government doesn't work and government doesn't, is the problem and not the solution. No, government does work when the people are involved and engaged in the government. And so I think that's, gonna be the way that we change things. And while I'm concerned and a little pessimistic about the ways in which our Supreme Court can be an avenue for equality and for redress for people who are marginalized, I think that it just is then a reminder that we're going to have to do things locally, and we're going to have to do things with our local, with our municipalities and with our state governments, and holding our Congress people accountable, because we can't rely upon the court right now as an avenue for us to seek the kind of redress that we're going to need to seek for the next, in the coming times.
Thank you. And I'm glad you brought up the education, because even for me, I'm 37. It wasn't until I was 35 that I realized, oh, it's pretty easy to get involved in your local government. And so I want to spread that awareness, and I'm glad that it's going to happen, that it's not this daunting thing. And so I'm glad that's being talked about. Thank you. Brad.
Yeah, I so much agree with all of that. I'm just gonna like either say me too, or say a couple other things. And the first is just on Carrie Ann's final point, is like, and I think Justice Ginsburg said this as well. It's like, one person, one justice, one court. That's not a movement. A movement is a lot of people working together at all different levels of government and at government and on society and on media. It's like, that's what a strong movement is. And so all of our movements and our movements working together should be able to pivot. If it's not the Supreme Court, we go to Congress. If it's not there, it's at the state level. It's just, we should be able to find a way to push forward. And there have been bleak decades with the Supreme Court, mainly bleak decades, actually, when you think about it, for a long, long time. And we found a way mainly to push forward on many things. I think in terms of engagement, I guess I just give a shout out. I know City of West Hollywood has a lot of great kind of commissions and ways for people to be involved. That's so important. They're there at the state level. We should really demand representation anytime there's appointments to be made. Those are as important as elected officials, and those folks do a lot of work. And my judge friends don't like this, but at the local LA County Superior Court level, if you're a lawyer, please think about being a judge. If we want the criminal justice system to change, we can't have mainly prosecutors being the judges. And and Brown and Newsom have started pushing that further, but it's going to be a very slow change in the way that happens. So if there's opportunities there, that system isn't going to work differently until there's more diversity in people's experiences who are being judges. And then I'll just go back to the real local level, which is having conversations one-on-one. And I struggle with some of the things that Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, because they sound a little conservative and a little bit like maybe too much respectability politics. But she did believe engaging with people that she disagreed with and trying to persuade people. And I worry about, I guess, coming from a movement that has relied on coming out to get anywhere, with having extremely difficult conversations with people who are very close to you and probably who can hurt you more than almost kind of anyone, with what those reactions to those conversations can be. I worry about a politics that gives up on continuing to having difficult conversations and persuading the people that we can persuade. I don't believe everyone is persuadable. I don't believe on every single day all of us have to show up for difficult conversations. I think we will make more progress if on most days, most of us are able to show up and still have faith that people are reachable, at least some people are reachable, and engage in those conversations. And I think she believes that even more strongly than I do, but there is the strand in that I think that is really important, to continue to have those conversations, even when they're very difficult.
I mean, I know I could be better about that, because Karen, like what you were saying, sometimes I just feel so angry and so tired, and I just get so triggered and I lose my patience. So I know I need to work on just listening and then responding more patiently. So now to wrap it up, I know you both have gone into some action items. So I'd like to tie some of that in again to this last question and last statement. Millions of people, especially women and girls, have been inspired by Justice Ginsburg, aka the notorious RBG. How do we sustain the legacy of Justice Ginsburg? What is one thing anyone can do in the spirit of Justice Ginsburg and honor her legacy? So Brad, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think I may have just answered that with the conversations, like having those difficult, like really trying to reach her challenge. And I guess it's based on my experience, my challenge too. And like I said, you don't have to do it every day or with every fool who comes in front of you. But we do need to identify the people that are movable and try to move them. And part of those difficult conversations is also holding people accountable, right? And I think, and this kind of gets back to the work we do at the Williams Institute, but I think what we've learned from the last 4 years is we can't let assertions that are not based on truth, on facts, on research slide anywhere. And if you hear people say, and look at these issues today, like trans athletes and girls in sports will blah, blah, blah. What are you talking about? This people engage in athletics after school and junior high and high school. Like, what on earth? Is like to really push back on that. The right in most of the country is kind of winning this argument that abortion is dangerous for women. And it's like, what's dangerous for women? It's having babies in a country where there's such high risk of to women when they have babies, and particularly for women of color. That's what's risky. It's not abortion. But like, there's been such this push, not just for the last 4 years, but for a long time, of these assertions and policy based on assertion and bias and prejudice. And I think even in our individual conversations, anytime we hear something that's just kind of thrown out there like that, we need to say, prove it. I'm from Missouri, show me. Like, what is that based on? What is your basis for saying that?
I want to thank you for saying that, Brad, because as you were talking before, I was thinking, I think a lot of times we mistake having dialogue with and engaging people with having to, like, it's equal. Like, equal time means, it's equally legitimate. No, if you're spouting BS, I can call you on your BS. And just because I'm calling you on your BS doesn't mean that I'm not engaging with you, or I'm not being respectful for you, or that I'm not listening to you. I heard you. I heard what you said. It's inaccurate. It's wrong. It's in bad faith. It is, disinformation. It is, anti-intellectual, it's racist, it's sexist, it's, homophobic. I can say that to you. And just because I challenge you doesn't mean that I'm not respecting you or that I'm not listening to you. I heard you very clearly, and now I'm going to challenge you. And that's something I think which is very consistent with the legacy of Justice Ginsburg, because Justice Ginsburg, while she was, she was famously friends with, Justice Scalia, she was scathingly critical of him as well. And she could cut him with her lace collar in a very respectful, and intellectual way. But she sliced him up quite frequently. And that's what was respectable about her. And that's what was inspirational about her was, she used her intellect and her way with words to challenge, positions and interpretations of the law that were wrong. And she didn't allow his, intellectual, constitutional argument of strict interpretation stand. She didn't let his, she was not bowed by his, by his intellect. She matched his intellect and cut it down into, and it did it in ways that people could relate to. And so I think that's the lasting legacy, is that, yes, we should be engaging with other people. We should be talking about, having difficult conversations, but do not mistake that for meaning that you have to bow to it or that you have to let it stand. If it's wrong, it's wrong. And, and that's a legacy that we can, carry away. I think that's an important legacy of Justice Ginsburg that can inspire all of us.
Oh my gosh, I definitely feel empowered by hearing that. So thank you, Carrie Ann and Brad. Carrie Ann, are there any other but other action items directly that you can suggest?
I just go back to what Mary Lou said about, being engaged, thinking of stepping into positions of leadership. Don't look just to other people to solve the problems. You run for office, you serve on a board or commission, they are very important. As you're serving on the Women's Advisory Board, and I serve on the Commission for Women, and I serve on a couple of other boards. Our elected leaders look to us for guidance and for support. And those are very valuable ways to be engaged. It is our responsibility to fix the messes that exist, and we can't look to other people to solve them. So that's something that I just would, reiterate leaving with folks tonight.
Thank you both so much. This was incredible, Brad, Carrie Ann. I'm so grateful that you were here. Larissa and Jenny, our staff, thank you for everything you did to bring this together. Our chair, Jenner, and the rest of our Women's Advisory Board, and our mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and the rest of our council. Thank you everyone so much for this wonderful evening and for all your empowering and insightful, and just everything that you said was so wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you guys so much. This was awesome.
Thank you again for inviting me. I appreciated being here today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Such an honor to have you both here. Thank you.